am coming to you live from my kitchen laundry area, glamorous and glorious as it is. I am going to be doing my very own version of stand-up because it's something I've always wanted to do, and quite frankly, I've always been too wussified to do it. For any Yankee fans out there listening, wussified means to be completely clutched in the grasp of being a total wussy. Something I am proud to admit. Now, off the top of my head is a hat, which I will dispense with. So you can see my lovely hairdo. I got it did earlier tonight. It seems really important to mention this particular hairdo is more dyke, lesbian, than skinhead. I live in Texas, so sometimes it's important to point that out. Clearly, were it not for my hair, there'd be no other way to tell that I was a lesbian. That might not be true. I've decided that it's time for me to go ahead and do this because I promised people that I would. They will harass me endlessly if I don't. And I'm just going to give it a shot. Oh, for those of you who I look familiar to, aside from people who actually know me in real life or know me from online, it's because it's true. I was, in fact, the swimsuit Sports Illustrated model, 2010 version. And then they brought Twinkies back. And this is the glorious body that you now see. And by the way, anybody who finds it just excruciatingly important to point out, you're kind of chunky, you've got a little bit of weight on you, I appreciate that. I'm aware. I do actually dress myself most mornings or afternoons, so I do know what I look like. But that's all right. I live with it. Now, I've had a few medical challenges over the years. Snafus, boondoggles, lollygags. There have been many a time that I have been flabbergasted. I have, yes, indeed, had my gabber flasted by things that doctors have told me. And I have lost track of how many different times I have had doctors look at my chart and say, well, I've never seen this in a patient before. Which is not something that I take pride in, but I might as well embrace it. Several years ago, I had a syndrome called Meniere's syndrome, and I cannot even begin to spell it. But essentially, I was plagued with vertigo, horrible nauseousness, hearing loss, upwards to 4 or 5 times a week. Very much as if I drank, like the Irish person that I am, although at that time I was not drinking. That can be really fun to explain to a cop. Well, can you walk a straight line? Nope. Have you been drinking? Not a drop. So, for a while I quit driving. It seemed the safe and, humane thing to do for all the children that lived in the neighborhood. That's when they started me on a medicine called, well, one of them was Valium, which I knew about. The other one was Antivert. Took Antivert for about 3 years. This was all more than 10 years ago. It was not until last year that I realized Antivert stood for anti-vertigo. I have never claimed to be the sharpest stick in the woods. There are many things that I did not read. I have an entire list of things that I did not realize until I was in my 30s. Sun-kissed, for instance, means kissed by the sun. Yes, there are some people who knew this. I was not one of them. I did not know, for instance, that if you have a light switch that controls the light in one room and you have a light switch that controls the light in the other room, they don't say off on them. Also something I was not aware of until past my 30s. I'm not proud of this list, but it occurred to me that I was accumulating quite a bit of information that some people seem to know. Well, after many experiences with the Meniere's, I had one doctor who he tried. Part of the problem with my hearing and with my ears, and I apologize in advance if any of this grosses people out, but I seem to produce an inordinate amount of earwax. I could quite possibly make candles as a living, although I would not recommend that because I can't imagine they would smell good. But this particular doctor that I went to, his method of cleaning the earwax out of my ear was to use, much like what dental offices use, dentists use, hygienists use, a little thing that squirts water at a very high power into my ear and clear all the earwax out. This would tend to induce the episodes. I would go to the doctor, he would clean it out, I would go home. By that evening, I was puking up my toenails. That's also when I discovered that there are many muscles involved when one is hurling for hours that one is not aware of until the next day. I finally went back to him at one point because I knew that there were surgical remedies to this. I had been puking almost straight for 24 hours. I went to him, I explained, we've been battling this for over a year. Is it possibly time to refer me to an ENT? And he looked at my chart and he looked right in my face and he said, well, I just don't think it's that bad yet. I personally believe that I exercised quite a bit of restraint by not puking on his shoes, because I could have. At some point, he eventually got me to an ENT surgeon, who, by the way, realized that the best way to keep people from having a Meniere's attack was not to squirt water at a high pressure into their ear, but to rather clean it out gently with, again, what seemed like dental tools, but were nice little metal picks, and it was so much better. He tried so many things with me, and I felt bad for him. I really did. He tried, at that time, a new medicine called gentamicin, wherein you poke the antibiotic directly into the eardrum, which is about as pleasant as it sounds. The result in me was recurring ear infections for 6 months, until he finally said, I'm really sorry. You're one of 2 out of 100 patients that I've tried this on, and it hasn't worked. One more time when a doctor has said, I've never seen this happen. So he agrees to do the surgery. Now, the surgery is a pretty intense one. It's going to involve him and a neurosurgeon, wherein they cut open my skull, go in, find the nerve, and cauterize it, so that essentially, yes, I still get vertigo on the right side. My brain just does not know it. Well, I read a lot, and I read a lot of medical stuff. I like to be informed. This was the better of the surgeries. The other 2 guaranteed deafness, and we weren't there yet. He has me meet with the neurosurgeon. Neurosurgeon's a nice guy, wonderful guy. He talks to me. he explains, okay, I know that you know what we're going to do. I just want to go over it with you. One of the things is I'm going to cut a piece of your skull out about the size of a quarter. I'm going to repeat that. About the size of a quarter. And he held his hand up like this. That's not a quarter. It's a quarter maybe in Roman times. And he did not look that old. At that point, I should have maybe been concerned about him. But I went, okay, let's go with it. I have seen recent scans of my head. There is a gap in my skull, and in fact, it is larger than a quarter. I do, in fact, now have a soft spot on the back of my head that friends of mine who love me dearly keep threatening to poke just to see if little parts of me twitch. And so far, I've refrained from letting them do that. Pardon me. Oh, by the way, we are going to upload this, and for the purposes of this video, my name is going to be Skar Thrasher, which is hopefully making sense. And in a few minutes, I will show you the scar on the back of my head because it's very, very impressive. My sister, who was a missionary in Bolivia at the time, begged me to let them take the piece of the skull home with me, and I wish to this day that I had. That would have made an amazing necklace. I could wear it. I could go to biker bars. I could show them, I ripped this right out of my skull. And then I would run. So I'm recovering from the vestibular neurectomy. I'm in the hospital. It's been about 2 or 3 days. The nurses come in. They check on you. It's a neurosurgery. They want to make sure that you're okay. They're asking me identifying questions. Do you know where you are? Do you know what you had happen? What city we're in? It's about the 3rd day. There's 3 nurses in there. One of them's working on an IV. One of them's doing something over here. And they're asking me, do you know who you are? I said, yes. And I told them. They said, do you know why you're here? And I said, yes, I had a vestibular neurectomy. And then it got really quiet. And I'm laying there, and I'm thinking, oh, they found something. That's not good. And I finally said, y'all usually ask more questions than that. And they said, honey, if you can pronounce what we did to you, you're good. I thought, cool, I'm good to go. Now, before the surgery, this is one of the many reasons I adore insurance companies, I heard the conversation between the nurse receptionist and my insurance company at the time, trying to explain why it might be important to go ahead and keep me in the hospital for a little bit. And this was her end of the conversation. Well, yes, we do think it's important that she stay for longer than 23 hours because it's brain surgery and we're going to be operating inside her brain, and our doctors tend to like to keep people for a little while after that. And it sounds perfectly reasonable to me, apparently not to the insurance company, who still did not agree to it, but clearly I was able to stay. Now, the coolest thing about all of that is that when everything was said and done, I was out of the hospital. I'd had the surgery early in October of very last part of September of 1 year. So by the time Halloween rolled around, the scar was healed up enough. I had shaved the rest of my head, and I went as Frankenstein. And it was the best looking Frankenstein ever. I have pictures. I've been wearing my hair cut really short for years. I asked the doctor before I left the last day before I was going to see him again for my surgery, how much more of my hair do I need to cut? And he said, don't cut any more. because you might nick it. We'll have people that do that. I said, okay. They got done. I'm leaving the hospital. This side of my head was full of hair. This side of my head was gone of hair, except one precious little flap right here that flip-flapped until we got home and I was able to cut it off. I thought myself it was a charming, charming look. So I recovered from that. I had relatively good health for a couple of years, and then my body turned on me. I had been convinced, by the way, for years, I've yet to be able to prove this, but I had been convinced for years that there is some 80-year-old woman out there having a lot of fun with this 44-year-old body. And when I find her, we're going to have a little chat. Now, I do need to divert off of medical for a minute because I've got to tell y'all about my friend Becky. Now, I've known Becky for well over 20 years. She's one of the best friends I've ever had. We've shared apartments. We've shared cars. We've not shared girlfriends. We have standards. But one of the things that Becky and I have done for each other over the years is help keep track of who worked where, when, who was with who, when, who had which address. I would be filling out a job application. I would call Becky and go, okay, from 92 to 97, where did I live? What did I do? Who was I with? And she knew. She would keep a file. And I would do the same for her. Some of this has also possibly turned into blackmail material. So Becky and I remain close friends. Becky is a wonderful human being. She's a little bit shorter than I am, has a lot of passion. She's very, very loyal to her friends. And there were a few times, more than a few, that I would be in my room at the apartment just hanging out, reading a book. She'd poke her head in the door and say, grab your combat boots, we gotta go. Okay, so I'd strap on my combat boots. It was time for us to go take care of something. We'll be driving along, and I'll point out to her, I think it might be a good idea if we bring God along on this trip. And she's over there driving and smoking, and she looks at me and she says, I can't do it. I can't talk to him right now. You're going to have to. I said, okay. So I'll be in the car with my combat boots on and my cut-off jeans, and I'll go, okay, God, we're going to go try and take care of this. Can you please not let us get our ass kicked this time? If we could just throw that out there. Now, this was back when we were in our 20s. I'm not anymore. I'm a little bit older than that now. And at this point, and I'm sure she would back me up on this, at this point, were the situation to come up, I could be sitting in a chair by the pool and somebody come up and decide to mug me, and I would just look at him and go, okay, look, here's the cell phone. I've got a tablet over here. You're going to need the charger. That'll help. Have fun with it. I'm just going to sit over here and be old. And I figured out when I got old. And it's none of the classic earmarks that most people think. It's not the first or second or all the times that I have to take my glasses off and do this or take my glasses off and go, yeah, I can still see somebody. It is not when I'm at my doctor's office, as I was a couple of days ago, and the doctor ma'ams me. That's not it. It's not even when it takes me 9 hours to get from the bathroom to the bedroom. That's not it. What I have discovered when I discovered I was old is when I was in my kitchen fixing myself a sandwich. And it slipped out of my hands and it hit the floor. And I looked at it, and immediately in my head I thought, the 5-second rule no longer applies. I just spent 22 minutes making a peanut butter and honey sandwich. If I can get to that sandwich before the dogs do and brush off most of the hair, I'm going to eat it. But this is also, and those of you who have friends or parents or aunts or uncles who are getting older, please take some mercy. Because this is, and I have to take my jacket off for this one. This is what happens when you get old. There's something on the floor, and you're going to retrieve it, and it looks a lot like this. Hold on. I got it. I'm almost there. Wait. Now, my partner and I have her daughter living with us, who's 18. She is a wonderful, wonderful young woman. About 176% of her body are legs. And so she'll come in and see me in this position, and she'll just swoop right down and pick up the sandwich. And I know that she does it out of love, but my thought is, I spent 6.5 minutes headed for that sandwich. I was almost there. And that's why we keep crutches around the house. Not that I would ever hit her with it. She would hit me back.